Hey, everybody in YouTube land, this is No Level Cap, and today we ask the question, what the fuck is going on with gaming?
Yo, welcome back to the No Level Cap podcast. I am your host, Sage Ashford. These are my co-hosts, Devin Butts, Rakeem Beck, Terrence Flowers, and Will Coleman. Y'all know the drill. We covering all the anime, all the games, all the nerd culture, none of the bullshit. So you might have noticed our intro was kind of like out there. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're looking for us to have all the answers, you can wrap that shit up right the fuck now. Because we ain't got them. We ain't got them. But I did want to talk about what's going on in the gaming world because the last month, really the last few years have been wild. Like all of 2020, everything since 2021 has been wild. And it's just been like an endless, like just if you just start reading off random headlines, like important headlines in the gaming world, you like, what the fuck? Yeah, just over and over again. Like, what the fuck is going on? You know? So let's just go ahead and get started. We ain't got a lot of time. I want to, because we got other things we got to get into. So let's just go ahead and get started. Over the last month or so, we saw what at one point probably you would have thought was impossible. If you follow video games at all, you know by now, the best way I can say it is Forza is on PlayStation, my nigga. Let me say it again. Forza is on PlayStation. Forza Horizon 5 is on PlayStation. Y'all remember when the meme was Halo Gears Forza? That's all Xbox had. That was their meme for years. Well, now Forza, one of their primary IP, is over there on PlayStation. Xbox has basically gone multi-platform while still retaining their own console. And I just want to know, like, do y'all think, how long is it before Sony doesn't see? Because, like, right now, Sony is like, they in the driver's seat. And it's baller. It's live. It's like, yeah, you know, we won the console war. But I mean, what's winning when you ain't making no money? And it's not the Xbox. It's not that Sony is broke, but like they're not seeing the return on the investment that they want from these games that they increasingly spend more and more money on. And so the question is, how long is it before Sony looks at Xbox and it's like, that's not even a threat, and we got to make this money? And they start putting their games on Xbox consoles. Does that ever happen? And what would it take for Nintendo to follow and do the same? Terrence.
Like you said, obviously it's going to come down to money. Like, what's the ROI looking like at the end of the day? If you spent $200 million to make a game and you make $300 million, well, that's not really the best profit, to be quite honest. I mean,
it's all right.
You might look at it as like, hey, I made $100 million, which I mean is great. Don't get me wrong, but it's probably not the ROI that Sony ultimately wants. Because let's be honest, these companies, they want all the money. They don't want some of the money. As you say, Sage, they don't want some of the money. They want all of the money. And so it's just going to get to a point where if budgets just continue to increase for these games, to make games, and Sony just isn't seeing the return on investment for it, I think that's what it's going to take. Now, I don't know about them going to Microsoft, is like putting their stuff on Xboxes quickly. I think really the first step, which we've already started to see happen in some cases, is them putting stuff on PC. But really what's going to come down to is putting it on PC day one. Like not just waiting like a year or 6 months later to put stuff on PC, but putting it on there day one. I think that's going to be the next step, just because, yeah, Sony, they aren't making as much money with these games anymore. Even though these games are critically acclaimed and some of the best of this generation, you know, like Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon, like those games are great. But, you know, when we look at, you know, how much it costs to make them, I'm sure Sony just hasn't seen the profit that they ultimately would like in order to justify the means, essentially. And a lot of this, I think, also comes down to brand pride, because like a lot of these, all three of these companies, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, they all kind of come from a different era. You know, Nintendo is like the last of the true bastions of gaming. Like they were the ones who really like saved us from the gaming crash of the 80s. And then you have Sony, who came in like in the mid 90s as a competitor to Nintendo and the others at the time. And then you had Microsoft, aka Xbox, who came in the 2000s that tried to compete with both. Really more so compete with Sony than compete with Nintendo, because Nintendo's just kind of
at the time when they first came in, Nintendo was trying to compete just like everybody else.
I mean, true,
and it wasn't until they got stomped out with the GameCube that they was like, all right, I think there's even a term for it, the blue ocean theory. It was after they got stomped out, they were like, all right, well, we got to get away from these red oceans of all this competition and swim towards a blue ocean that's vast and free, and we ain't got to do all this graphic shit.
Yeah.
And after that, that's when they was like, all right, well, we not, and it was just Sony and Xbox competing with each other.
Yeah, you're right. Pretty much, yeah, like more so that was the case during like the PS3 360 era, where really that's when like the Xbox and the Sony fanboys were the ones duking it out, and Nintendo was kind of on their own. So yeah, in the beginning, you're right. But yeah, like a lot of it just comes down to the brand like pride for each of them. Sony, I think Microsoft was willing to give up their pride more than the others, just because they were like, hey, clearly this isn't working for us. Let's just try something different. Sony, yeah, they're going to have to give up some of that at some point.
It wasn't just the money, but I think some of it is that we often say, or I often make the mistake of saying Microsoft instead of Xbox, but that I've been trying to delineate, because like Xbox is its own thing, and then above them is Microsoft, and Microsoft started looking at the books and looking at like the lack of profit over like over a decade, like all that time where they really weren't making any money, and they were like, hey man, do what you got to do to turn this into a profitable division before we get rid of y'all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, even if Phil Spencer probably did want to keep things like, oh, I want to keep things in competition and Xbox this, Satya Nadella, the dude that's over Microsoft, was probably like, hey man, I don't care nothing about no console war and none of that shit that y'all talking about. That don't mean nothing to me. Where the money at?
Yeah. And in regards to Nintendo, I mean, I really don't have much to say about them, because Nintendo, really, we're just going to have to see how the Switch 2 pans out. Because if the Switch 2 is as big as the Switch, there's no reason for Nintendo to go multi-platform. I mean, I don't know, like, are budgets really talked about as much on like the Japanese gaming side as they are with the West? Because I feel like we know more about what budgets look like for like Western games than we really do for the Japanese games. Or maybe I'm not as informed. Can you tell me, Sage?
I can. This was gonna be part of my answer, but I think I'm gonna just start mixing my answers in with y'all, just to make things go a little smoother. But in this case, Nintendo themselves spoke on their budget a couple months ago, and they were saying basically that their budgets were lower than most Western games and most like modern AAA games. But they also talked about like, yeah, but as we keep making new systems, it's not as if our budgets are staying the same. They are also increasing. And so you look at it and it's like Switch. If you think about the technology that the Switch was working from, it's like, man, it basically just like a souped up PS3, or a souped up, like a low level, like it was just barely scratching what the PS4 could do. And so like, yeah, of course the budgets are lower. Like you not having to deal with like it's not as graphics intensive, not as resources intensive, and thus not as time intensive. And so it just doesn't cost as much, as opposed to like Switch 2, which is going to be scratching the limits of what the PS4 Pro could do, and maybe even a little better than that. And so like, yeah, the budgets are going to go up, and the time that it takes, they talked about the time that it took to develop video games was going to go up as well. Because I mean, like if you look at it, the Switch, some of their IPs, they were once a generation on purpose. Like Mario Odyssey only came out once a generation. That was by design. It's not that they couldn't have made another Mario. And you look at Xenoblade, I mean, Monolith Software put out Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, which was basically a reworked Xenoblade with additional content and all of that, and Xenoblade 3, all in one generation, and then added DLC, like substantial DLC to all three of those games. I don't think that they're going to be able to do the same thing. And then now they've got Xenoblade X Definitive Edition coming out as well. I don't think they're going to be able to do the same thing on a Switch 2. I think it's going to take too long. And so I agree with you when you said, hey, man, If the Switch 2 does well, then yeah, they probably won't. Like, more likely than not, the Switch will do well. I don't know that the Switch does what the Switch 2. I don't know that the Switch 2 does what the Switch 1 did.
Yeah.
Like, the Switch 1 is approaching best-selling console of all time numbers, and I think that's a big ask. I think some of that came from the pandemic, Animal Crossing, people shut in their houses, and remember, I think it was longer. I think it was harder to get a Switch for longer during the pandemic than it was during the launch.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know that they get that burst of consoles sold, and if they don't, who knows? Like, if the Switch 2 sells, because like the Switch 1 is at 150 plus million units. If the Switch 2 sells 90 million units, that's still a massive success. But like I could see them start to look towards like multi-platform a little bit.
Yeah, and and it's one of those things where we also don't know how potentially tariffs may turn out, so we don't know if that may affect Switch 2 as well. I'll just to keep my answer short so we can move on to someone else. I think Sony will cave, but they'll start with day one PC first. Nintendo is kind of hard to say. We'll just have to see how the Switch 2 pans out for them. If it's successful, probably not. But if it isn't, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of hard to imagine Mario on any other console than his own.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a different world. I mean, like, technically, you
That'd
can
be
get
like
that
going
now.
back to the Philips CDI.
Yeah.
Oh shit, that's a long time ago.
And that was a stain on gaming history.
I mean, they don't talk about those games. They pretend like they never happened. I think as far as Xbox, one thing I'll say, as like somebody that likes seeing different competitors and seeing them compete, I think it's sad that Xbox basically finally got to the point where it could fight back on games, and it's effectively just too late. Like, it's too late now. Like, I watch Kind of Funny a lot, and Kind of Funny, they have this thing that's like, oh, well, when you have this many developers, eventually the dominoes will start to fall, and you'll see a bunch of games come out back to back to back, and they finally got there. That's what this is. Like, we saw the developer direct, and that's not even all the games that they have coming out this year. And last year they had a good selection of games coming out, and so they're finally at the point where the dominoes are starting to fall, and yet it's too late. Like, you took too long, and that's not entirely their fault. Sometimes that's just the fault of, I'm not even gonna say sometimes, that's the fault of modern game development. It takes, when you hear a studio getting formed and like, oh, we just formed and we're starting out on this exciting new venture, you can expect them to take a minimum of 4 years, even if they're trying to like reduce the number of years that it takes to develop a game, a minimum of 4, maximum 7 to 8. And so, like, I mean, it took them 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Like, they started talking about buying all those studios in 2017. Where are we now? 8 years later.
2025.
And so, like, 8 years later, like, now 7 and 8 years, because 2024 had a lot of games. And so now you're starting to see all the dominoes fall, and it's like, hey, man, that's cool, but it's too late now. And your games have to go elsewhere. And I think that sucks, because, like, it would have been fun to see Sony try to fight, because I am seeing, like, whether Sony fans want to admit it or not, like, Sony is not the Sony they were at the start of PS4 gen, when they were like trying to prove themselves to the fans again. Like, gone are the days of, hey, we're gonna try to openly vie for as many indie games as possible to fill in the gaps between our big first party games. Gone are the days of, hey, we're gonna do PlayStation experience and try to be as open as possible with you. Nah, they went back to being full corporate. And like all those the years of success of those big AAA titles and shit, they like, hey man, that's what we do now. That's what we make. And if you don't like it, cool. All these other people do, so fuck you. And so like there's a level of humility to a point, right? There's a level of humility that corporations have when they know they got to fight for your dollars and your interest. And like Sony doesn't have that anymore. Like, they know that they're not getting Nintendo fans. Like, Nintendo fans don't give a fuck about them. They still got their corny ass jokes about, oh man, you got to go play a video game instead of just doing a walking simulator. Nintendo fans is not finna come over there and play no damn Sony games. So like, Sony's like, all right, well, everybody else is coming to play our shit. And so they don't have to prove anything to nobody. And so like, Xbox gave up, and Sony, as far as Sony goes, like, what's going to happen is, I think by the end of this gen, you'll see day and date. I think that's it's just because even Insomniac talked about it at one point. Like, I don't know if y'all remember the leaks. Like, there were some headlines that came out, and it was like, I mean, this Spider-Man 2 is really cool, but like, is it worth spending 3 times the money that we spent on Spider-Man 1? And I mean, Keem, you played it. Is Spider-Man 2 3 times as good as Spider-Man 1?
Not. I don't even know how it would do that. It's good.
Exactly.
I like, even if you could, like, it's still just Spider-Man. At the end of the day, you had the foundation you made in the old Spider-Man game you brought out, which was excellent. And then you doubled down on that, added a new protagonist, had a split kind of story, and the content of the game was very positive. But at the same time, like, that's the foundation you built on. You're not making a new IP. You're not making a multiplayer game. So like that doesn't compute to being 3 times more sales just because you made a game with a bigger budget or better graphics. Those things don't necessarily correlate to one another.
Nope. And so, like, I think
ask Hollywood in regards to blockbusters, movie.
Man, you ain't never lied.
Yeah,
they struggling over there.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, you three times the budget. Like, eventually they like, hey man, we got to get this money back. And PC fans, they've come to a point where they like, hey man, I'll get it when it's on sale. Like, if you can't get it day one with Steam sales and Epic Game Store sales being what they are, you like, hey man, I'll get it when y'all put it out on sale. And so, like, even Square learned that lesson recently. They put Rebirth on sale for like $50, like a brand new. It's not that old. It's a year old, barely that. And they like, all right, $50. Like, and for $70, you can get both of them. So like, and it sold. It already in the time that it took for that game to come out. Something came out that they were like, it smashed through the expectations they had for the remainder of the fiscal year. Like it's already outsold whatever. Like, which is really just like 2-3 months. But still, within a week, they smashed through the expectations for 3 months.
It's a rarity to hear them.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, then they also say Dragon Quest also exceeded expectations.
Yes, it did.
Another rarity, like Will said, because they always like didn't meet expectations.
Yeah. But Dragon
expectations
Quest 3
have been met.
It's so yeah, Dragon Quest 3 did really well, and I think they say like 75% of that though was like Switch sales. So yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, even when I saw the game, I was like, this is Steam Deck. This is a game I'm playing on my Steam Deck.
Which, I mean, brings me to my next thing as far as Nintendo going multi-platform. They'll be the last to fall if they fall, and it'll be a long time from now. Like, I can see Sony midway through next gen putting their games on whatever the next Xbox is. I can see them finally being like, whatever. I don't see Nintendo doing it until after next gen, if they ever get around to it. What's up, Terrence?
It's also a thing that I just remembered is Nintendo will somehow have to cut the gimmicks too, because if you port stuff to other consoles or even to PC, you don't have the Nintendo gimmicks on those platforms, so they'd have to be far more streamlined. And I guess that's another aspect too. Nintendo isn't used to porting their stuff to other consoles or like other platforms. So
you hire a studio for it.
Yeah, so that's something they're going to have a learning curve too as well.
What's up, Keem?
All right.
There was a leak. I don't know if it's true or not, but they showed some specs of the new, like some deep specs of the new Nintendo Switch console. And apparently one of the new gimmicks is the nunchuck is a mouse. Yep. And that was like the clue, like, ooh, that is very interesting. That could lead to something.
For now, I'm just going to assume, because I don't want to like run away with it, but for now, I'm just going to assume they're trying to get more PC
games on the console.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, like,
Baldur's Gate or something like that on the Switch. Yeah.
And I mean, like, I'll say that, man, that's crazy. Could you imagine like a whole new audience going to get the Baldur's Gate after Baldur's Gate already sold some silly number of consoles?
Deserved.
Yeah, it's a great game, so deserved. I'll also like, I mean, the Switch ain't got that many gimmicks. It's got the Joy-Cons and shit, but like, if you want to play Switch games on PC, it's possible. I'm not gonna get into how it's possible, but it's possible. Like, it's a reason
it's possible.
Exactly. I'm not gonna go too much longer. I'm gonna just go ahead and pass it to Devin. What do you think, man?
I don't know, man. It's one of those topics, like when you look at like the budgets that these games have, and then like the return on investment. Because I mean, y'all brought up all the games I was thinking about that didn't do as well as the sales were expected to do. Spider-Man 2, even actually, I was just mentioning how well like Rebirth did. I don't think FF16 did that well on PC.
No, it
Like
didn't.
No,
it just kind of came out and just went kaput. And I'm like, that's kind of unfortunate. It's not like a terrible game. I know it's kind of divisive because it's really like Final Fantasy May Cry. That's, which is not the terrible worst thing. It's still a cool game. But yeah, I
would have done
mean,
better as a if it hadn't been a mainline game.
I agree. I definitely agree.
I can
Like it
see
should have
that,
been
yeah.
something like Dirty
that.
Cerebus, where it's like this is a side game, and because having that main title kind of, I think,
Comes
man,
with
this is a main,
expectations.
Yeah.
But even thinking about that, like y'all mentioned, the day in day out thing coming out on PC day one with PlayStation games, I think that'll help too. Because I remember Rebirth also, they were mentioning, hey, this game we didn't quite make our sales, and it's like, well, if y'all probably would have put it on PC at the same time, it probably would have. But also them doing that smart thing of putting it on sale, like Sage mentioned, and then also giving that bundle. I'm sure people's like, okay, there's no point for me not to get it. I get both games for $70. Nowadays, that's not really common to get like 2 games of that caliber, 2 like Game of the Year nominee type games.
Only people
Actually,
doing
one
that is
more.
Yakuza.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't get that quite often. But I don't know, man. I think Nintendo will probably. It's gonna take a while for them to go multiplayer. I think Nintendo's kind of they don't like their own little planet. I mean, they might. I mean, but I thought about Mario Kart 8. They've had a game that almost did basically what GTA 5 did. That game came out like 2014, and it was still. I'm like, bro. All right, now let's.
Yeah.
I'm glad we finally saw Mario Kart 9, bro. Like, come on, bro. It's been too long, bro. Like, how long is this game gonna run? So if they can have something like that and people still play it for that long and go crazy over this, like, hey, we good. We got Smash. I mean, we don't know if there's gonna be a new Smash on Switch 2 or not. But I think right now they'll be fine. But I think with PlayStation and Xbox, it's kind of weird to me because even like seeing Ninja Gaiden come back, there's so many games that I look at and I think of a certain console. When I saw Ninja Gaiden, I thought of Xbox because that's Ninja Gaiden and Ninja Gaiden Black. But then PS3 come around, we get Ninja Gaiden Sigma. That's on PlayStation. And then they just went multiplayer after that. So it's kind of like one of those things. Like I also think about Sony has kind of always been doing like this, like cinematic, high budget, like AAA style of game, even on PS2. Shadow of the Colossus, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Final Fantasy 10. So they've always kind of just pushed their pocketbook first with their games, and all those games were bangers, of course, and they sold like hotcakes. But again, this is a different time. Those games were a lot less expensive to make back then. So,
Just go say this real quick. Apparently, because there's an interview with Shuhei Yoshida on Kind of Funny, and Shuhei said, I'm kind of disappointed with the sales of Horizon Forbidden West. Because given how much money it costs. Horizon Forbidden West sold 8 million copies. That we know of. And they talking about we disappointed. I'm like, how much more money you gotta make? Like if that's what it take, like what's gonna happen? Like it's getting to be too much. Like how many copies you gotta sell for it to be a success now?
That is a good question though. Like if you sell that many copies or something, the question then there is like, how much did y'all really spend to make this? And then like, are y'all just that much money hungry? And we get it. Like if you're spending this much on a game, you want to make a good amount, because if you want to plan another game, you're gonna have about that much budget or the same to make the next one. And just like you asked Keen a question with Spider-Man 2, like 3 times as better as the one, and like it looked like a great game, but it didn't look like it was just leaps and bounds beyond what we had experienced in the first Spider-Man, and then even in Miles Morales. So it does kind of bold the question, like, what's all this extra money for? Is it? And I know things are like just like making models and stuff. All this stuff is expensive to do, but it's just like, if you got 3 times the budget, I kind of want the game to be 3 times as good. But like in Sony's case, I mean, they spent like money on that. That didn't really go as well as they thought. And then PC Spider-Man 2, I've been hearing it's been getting kind of some
PC
bad
version's
reports.
not good.
I was like, man, that's not. Now that's another question. If Sony, with them doing these PC ports, if they want to be successful, they're gonna have to make sure like these things are ready to go. Because if not, it's almost like it's a waste to even put these ports onto PC if they're gonna come out in this condition. I didn't hear too much about God of War. Like its experience seemed kind of smooth. I haven't had any problems with Rebirth. Really, like aside from like a few hiccups, just hearing it, just little small stuff. It runs even better than Remake did, which is weird because I feel like this game has a lot more in it. But yeah, like they're gonna have to make sure like you can't have something like that happen. You get one of your flagship titles come over and it's just like
that it doesn't take much money for them to recoup their costs, like for porting it over. So like basically everything they get on PC is money. Like it takes barely 100,000 copies or if that to like make their money back for the cost of the port. And so after that, it's all profit. But I mean, like, I think if you're gonna really make money, you're gonna have to take it more seriously than that. What's up, Terrence?
I would say in regards to Rebirth, I did hear that for some people the PC version doesn't work as well. It's kind of like a case-by-case basis.
That's why I had some mixed reviews on that.
Yeah, which with PC, it feels like that's always going to be the thing is your PCs are so customizable that each person might have a different experience in some way. So, yeah, these companies are going to have to nail down the PC versions as well.
And that's just something I actually told Rakeem. I was like, at one point we kept hearing like, oh, man, PC is the way to go. Just buy a PC and a Nintendo Switch and you'll be good. I don't know anymore because every time these PC ports come out, they be looking kind of shaky. So it's like, is PC really like people have 4080s and these 5080s and these 60-80,000 Ti RTX Super Ultras, and it's like I can't run Minecraft. So it's like I don't know. It's just weird. Like
bad.
I mean, like people like Marvel Rivals. People, the better your PC was at one point, the game runs bad. I'm still having problems running Marvel Rivals, but I can run Final Fantasy Rebirth on a 90 to 120 frames per second at 1440p. But I'm having problems running Marvel Rivals. So I don't know. That was something they brought out. Keem showed me that tweet. It's like the higher FPS you had, it will give you like frame lag. So it's like, wait, the better PC I have, the worse. Like that don't make no sense. I thought
you better lock it to 60.
I tried everything.
It also affected your damage too, apparently. But
that was different. It did. Yep.
I mean, that's been the thing.
That's crazy.
That's been a console version. No issues at all.
That's been the thing in games like for a long time for like PC. Like when I started playing Fortnite at like 144 frames, I'm like, I can't go back to 60 because I'm literally playing like a different game. So that's the one thing PC has. Like you can get all these crazy specs, but it's like it's a crapshoot when you get something. Like I was like, man, please let Rebirth run fine. It ran fine. But I'm gonna end it here soon. Xbox, this is my speculation, but I think that maybe them focusing so hard. This is just me because when Game Pass first came out, I wasn't the biggest advocate of it, but I definitely changed my tune on it because it's a great thing. But again, I will say they were focusing on that so much, and maybe that was kind of part of their plan of like, let's make us a platform, this digital platform of library games, and then we're gonna kind of seep it into the interways, and now we're gonna get it on PlayStation. But maybe them focusing on that service rather than like actual games that were coming out on Xbox and new games. That's what they should have been pushing. All this stuff like South to Midnight. Even it's crazy because even like the games from the developer direct, some of those games you still can play on other consoles. Like Ninja Gaiden, again, is a game I think synonymous with Xbox, but it's also on PC and PlayStation. So it's like it's not just a game for y'all's console. But I think maybe that could have been something like, hey, y'all should have focused on like y'all new AAA titles, the thing that's showing like what these games can do on the new hardware instead of showing like a collection of older stuff, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, because I think like backlogging and cataloging and backwards compatibility, that stuff is important too. But if you're trying to make that money, you got to show, hey, what's this new stuff? Especially the thing you spend all that money on, and especially when y'all acquired all those studios.
Well, that's a lot of money. They didn't have anything. They were still developing games. Like it takes, I was saying, it takes 5, 6, 7 years. And so, like when Game Pass came out in 2018, it's like, what you want us to show? Nothing.
Gears.
So all they had was Gears, Halo, and
Fortnite.
Well, I guess it's a great songwriter says. I guess not. I don't know, man. It just kind of unfortunate. I feel like Xbox just kind of got behind. We only got these 3 titles, and it's like, man, like what we gonna do, bro? But I don't know. I think it's gonna take a while for Nintendo if they do go multiplat. I think they're gonna try to rock it out. PlayStation, I do agree with you. Say I think probably their first step is gonna be just putting stuff on PC day one.
I think that, and then by the time the next Xbox come out, they're gonna be to work something out with Xbox. Like, all right, look, man, y'all need some help. We need to make money. Let's make something happen.
They might do a mergers console to X Station.
We going back to the Phantom days.
The play box. The play box.
The play box.
Phantom. It'll play everything. Entirely. Nintendo, Sony, and Xbox.
This is crazy.
Sony and Microsoft do what Nintendo don't.
All right, Rakeem, what you got for us, man?
All right, man. So like you said, about increasing budgets have definitely changed the landscape of the gaming industry. We're already seeing that with how Xbox has approached this new generation, this current generation, excuse me, of trying to put their platform as a service that can be done on multiple devices, any device, anybody else's device. It's kind of seeped into other people's consoles, and it's kind of cool to kind of see these three different major juggernauts really have three different strategies because they're at three different phases of where they want to be. Like Xbox is at like, we ain't making enough money off console sales, so we got to recoup that money by spreading our games awareness and availability to as many devices as possible. Sony's trying to figure out how to kind of transition from like keeping the brand of their first party games, but allowing some accessibility through PC and seeing how that waylays the cost of how expensive their games are. And Nintendo is Nintendo. They still holding the ground, but how long will they be holding ground? So it's like three different, completely different strategies. I think Xbox is trying to get ahead of the game. One big thing we've talked about years ago was that, hey, how far are we from physical consoles going away and we're going to have digital services? Xbox is already hitting the ground running on that. Like, this is essentially what they're doing now with the Xboxes. Everything's an Xbox idea.
Xbox, yep.
That's what the strategy is. Like, especially now that we know Xbox Game Pass has the cloud service where you can play games through the cloud on different devices. That's a big sign like, hey, this is where we're going in the future, because producing consoles and getting our ass kicked by Nintendo and Sony over and over again, that's over with. I don't know if Sony is still on the tails of that. I think they are assessing the strategy, because I mean, if, like we said, Xbox is making more money off of putting their games on Sony's console than their own consoles, that's a red flag. That's a sign to me to like, okay, gaming is changing now. If I can make money off my competitor's console and that helps me, then I need to assess something differently. I think Sony already kind of has cracked once they started putting games on PC. That was the first sign like, hey, we're kind of already shying away from like this exclusivity mindset. We're already seeing the third-party studios like Square Enix, because of the money they've lost. They're like, man, fuck this exclusivity shit. We're off that. Which is funny because they got away from it in the Xbox 360 era. So I thought they was gonna stay that way, and then went back to it, and they were like, nah, let's not do that again. So if your third-party studios are also getting away from exclusivity, that could also be a sign for the Sony first-party studio, because it takes so much time to make games, like you talked about earlier. If they can't rely on first-party games from their third-party studios to compensate them in the meantime until they make their next God of War, their next Ghost, their next Horizon, or new IP, they got some new IPs in that pipeline, then they might have to also, in the future, you never know, we might see God of War on Xbox in 2029. That's a possibility now. That's a world we live in. It's a weird world right now, man. It's a weird world. So the world has changed. So ISC, because Xbox has already set their strategy in strong. They killed their pride, and they think about survivability over pride, which I can respect. Sometimes you gotta bend the knee. They bent the knee. They bent the knee so they could survive. Shout out to them. Nintendo, though, Nintendo is in its own world because they still hold all the cards to their own destiny, and that is the Switch 2. Like, what is the Switch 2's impact on the gaming landscape going to be? Is it still going to have the same force as Switch 1? We discussed that earlier. Maybe, maybe not. I think it depends on this next generation of Nintendo exclusives. Are they going to shift the balance in like conversation and quality, kind of like Breath of the Wild did when it came out, where it was like a must-buy game. Everybody was talking about it. You see it everywhere. Or the new Mario game, is it going to be innovative? Is it going to take, see how good Astro Bot did last year? There's an appetite for platformers right now of AAA, big, cool, kid-friendly platformers. Is Mario like, that was cool, but I'm the boss. I'm the king of this shit. So, and take that mantle back from them. I think that's going to be a big determiner of that. And also, because of how the Switch 2 is a little more powerful, how many third-party developers are they able to attract to the console as well? And then if they're able to attract those third-party developers, there's nothing they need to do but keep doing the same shit they've been doing, if they're able to maintain their business in the same way. So the shift in the industry, to me, is going to be more so on the Sony and the Xbox side in the future. They're already communicating, already working together Now, I don't know if this ends up in like some mega super surface Netflix gaming shit in 2030 where we got Xbox or PlayStation games.
I think by the time they're willing to do that, Nintendo will have started to change their mind as well. And we talking further out than 2030. We talking 2035, 2040, something like that.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, probably farther out than that. I think that we might get one more console generation.
All right. So here's the thing. I think consoles aren't going to go anywhere. I think you're going to get to a point where consoles just sell way less. Like right now, you're seeing pretty much the apex of what consoles can do. Triple digits, 100 million consoles sold. Sony, they're tracking, I think, just slightly behind or just slightly ahead. I forget which one it is, but it's like it's very close to what they were doing in the PS4 generation. I think slowly you'll start to see that go away. Casual fans just don't care like that. The second you get to the point where you can stream 2K, Madden, and COD on their TVs, they're gonna be like, okay, cool. I don't need a box no more. And they'll be fine paying $60 on their screen and shit like that. Everybody's not like us. Everybody doesn't care about, I need the hardcore. I got to have a box. You see how quickly people gave up physical gaming, like physical copies of games? They gave that shit up quick.
It didn't even was a fight. It just happened.
Not at all. Like it was about convenience. And the second it's convenient without giving up too much for them to stream it on their TV, that's what's going to happen. And you'll just see the Xbox app and the PlayStation app. But the problem is there's a lot of people who still want a box for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people are going to there's the little things that you notice, like when you play a game and you're not quite getting the frame rate you want, or when you play a fighting game and it's like just a little bit of lag, and you're like, hey man, this not gonna happen on physical consoles. And so those people will continue to buy physical consoles. But what you'll see is instead of seeing 100 million consoles sold or 60 million consoles sold, you might see 20 million. You might see that. And consoles won't go anywhere. You'll still be able to go buy a box from someone. But the days of oh man, you got the new PlayStation 6, nobody's going to have that. It became almost a status symbol during the pandemic. Remember the me of the PS5, you have all the thirst traps, and you'd have dudes that had money for no reason talking about I got that new PS5. Never played a video game in their life, but they had the money and it was hard to get. And so they wanted to show off. And that's going to be gone. By the PS7, that's gone. Nobody's going to care anymore because you'll be able to. And the kids are growing up. If you the kids will save us. No, they won't. Because they not only are they growing up on their phones, but all their favorite streamers stream on PC. And so they're not asking for PlayStation 6. They're asking for a PC, a gaming PC, so that they can play games with their friends.
Truth
so
be told, the first thing they're going to ask for is a phone.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But after the phone, all their favorite streamers play on gaming PCs. And so they're just going to get a gaming PC. So the kids can't save you either. So really the only thing there is a value, like Devin was saying earlier, that hey man, on console, shit just works. There is a value to that. And there are going to be some people who they may not care about frame rate as much, but they just want the shit to work. They don't want to play with no settings. They don't want to dick around. They just want it to work. But the second that it gets to a point where it just works on streaming, what's the point of spending $700 on a fucking console?
That makes sense. And that kind of opens up. I'm bad. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I would say that opens up a whole nother conversation in the future. I guess to some degree we can say that this era of the gaming has the bubble has popped, especially on AAA, and it has to be changes now because it happens to every industry. It happened to the internet, the internet bubble, .com bubble, many years ago. So I guess the phase of what the future looks like is would it be more of a subscription model to these online services? Will third-party consoles come into play for the retro people and then older people who want the console experience? We already have that now. With people making the old PS1s and the old N64 stuff.
So or just retro consoles in general, not retro consoles, but the custom consoles where you could just put all the old games on them. That's becoming more popular. Everybody
the tiny ones that you can get, the tiny PS1s, 64s and everything.
Those are surprisingly easy to get. You could come get those games, 100 games on one mini console right now if you want. Just an old retro game.
Or even what is it, the Loki and the Odin and all those, those kind of consoles, that shit is getting popular.
Not even to mention with the success of the Steam Deck and of course Switch is also mobile. We could also go into a new handheld era where the handheld era start again. and pick back up. What does that look like with maybe Sony and Xbox? We'll see. But yeah, there's going to be some shifts. The only one I see not changing as fast is going to be Nintendo, but the other two, as far as Xbox already done it. Xbox already said, look, we look into the future. We're trying to make our brand bigger than the console and make it more approachable to anybody, anywhere on any device to play it. And Sony is slowly, because they were ahead for so long, but now they're getting to the realization that like the costs are only going up so much. And like, if your costs go up, but the upkeep on your costs, the amount of money you make isn't going up with it, you have to make changes. No way around it. Or your business is going to die. So yeah, that's kind of what I predict to happen. Xbox is already on the way. Sony's going to do it slowly, and Nintendo, until something drastically shifts in the industry completely, they're going to stay with the same model.
I do think there's a chance, and after this, I'm going to let you jump in, Will. I do think there's a chance that someone gets caught in the cold. Like someone doesn't make a shift that they need to make, because Xbox is already making the shift that they need to make for the future. And I think Sony and Nintendo both are like, hey, man, we're fine over here. And I think there's a chance that somebody shifts a little too late, jumped like, a year later or 2 years later when they should have jumped a year or two earlier. And then you just all of a sudden it's like, man, remember when so-and-so was called? Like, no, nobody remembers because they took too long. Yeah, they got Sega.
They got Sega.
But go ahead,
hard
Will.
to say.
Okay, y'all pretty much covered like all the major points I could have ever had about this whole thing anyways. Because I do agree, Microsoft is doing this strictly out of survivability. They just like, look, we need to kind of stay here. So if y'all want some of our games, come have them. We're going to come shake hands with you. We're going to be buddy-buddy today. Come play these games everywhere. Now, Sony, if I had to say something about them, as big a fan of Sony as I've been for these, however long I've been on this earth, I got to be real with you. They got hard-headed over time. They did. That's a lot of their issue. They really got hard-headed and extremely prideful. They were just like, yeah, we could do this. We could keep it here, and it don't matter because y'all gonna buy it. So, and
they did for a while.
They did for a good while. They were just like, yeah, it don't matter. Y'all gonna buy it. So by all means, come get this game. Come get our system, and you gonna pay it. And now they looking at it like, oh no, they kind of have to begrudgingly now shake hands with other people. Now they feel it. They know it's coming, and they just like, I don't want to, but you got to put the games elsewhere. God damn it, because we ain't making nothing back. We can't pay rent. Everything else is paid, but we might not have a roof over our heads. The lights on, but ain't nobody home. So yeah, that's what they feeling like. And looking at Nintendo, I agree with every single one of y'all. They gonna be real slow to turn unless that Switch 2 does something magnificent. If the Switch 2 does magnificent, just like every one of y'all said, they gonna be fine where they at. They can sit there and they got it. They hold all the cards. They on their throne. They gonna stay where they at, and they ain't gonna have to move a fucking muscle. But if the Switch 2 decides it ain't gonna do much, Japanese people hard-headed as hell. I'm just saying it like it is. They are not gonna go outside and be like, we need to change. It's gonna take them a second. And Sage, you said somebody might get caught out in the cold. I don't think Nintendo will, but if they stubborn enough, they will.
I think it would be, and I mean, like everybody's stubborn to a point. I think Nintendo particularly, because Sony is Japanese, they not stubborn like that, but Nintendo is particularly like hard-headed, and they like, hey man, because like you remember they tried to wait out, and they successfully did. They tried to wait out DVDs. They never, their console never had DVDs.
Yep. Right.
And now it's like, you don't even have to do that. Like they don't even do Blu-rays. They switch back.
I was gonna say they never actually played anything really.
they went to this little computer chip of a cartridge that you put into your system. They went back to a cartridge format.
Even the Wii U had some kind of weird not Blu-ray thing. They was like, no, we're not doing any of that. Like they never, like Terrence said, they never played anything.
They don't consider themselves a media hub in the same way Xbox and PlayStation do.
They've always wanted to be a toy company.
They always have. They were a car company when they started. But yeah, to just kind of end off really quickly for me, so that way we go on to the next question here. I think Xbox and PlayStation, they gonna become like best of buddies, like coming like soon. They gonna realize, hey, we kind of need each other more than we need to be punching at each other. So let's get these games out and play. Nintendo gonna be the hard-headed ones that unless their success is through the roof, They're not moving at all. And also, once again, one more agreement point with Terrence, because I remember him mentioning this. If Nintendo ever has to go to putting their stuff on other consoles, let alone probably putting it on PC, that's still gonna be a weird time to see Mario elsewhere. They're gonna have to drop the gimmicks. And if they can't drop the gimmicks, that's where the problem's gonna come into play for them. Because if you can't drop the gimmick putting your game elsewhere, unless that gimmick is like very minuscule compared to anything else that you would have with your own proprietary console, Nintendo gonna be in a little bit of hot water then. So that's
So
all
real
I got
quick,
for it.
before we jump to the next topic, I think you've already seen Nintendo start to shift a little bit, like subtly.
Mhm.
For one, they like it, Nintendo. Like I brought this up earlier when I said the Nintendo went out and became the Wii, and I want that to be really important. I want people to think about that because they like to say, oh, you know, Nintendo used to be, you know, they had the Super Nintendo and the N64 and the GameCube. Yeah. And they sold 10 million less every time they put out a new console until they were finally like, hey, man, fuck this. And they started doing the gimmicks. And in 2005, when they released the Wii, they started with the gimmicks and they never let them go. And they gimmicked their way all the way to the Switch. And then something happened with the Switch 2. First off, it's called the Switch 2. They hadn't done that in ages. Since the Nintendo to the Super Nintendo, it was always some different name. They always had a different name, a different idea, a different gimmick. And like this time they were like, no, we don't want to do that anymore. And so the gimmick appears to be that the Joy-Cons are mice, maybe. And like there's no big that was a big complaint and people were kind of pushing back. And I'm like, I think what Nintendo is they've seen this level of success and they are now afraid that if they do anything else, they won't see that same success. And I mean, like, you know, Nintendo quirky games have always worked, but Nintendo quirky consoles, I mean, like that Wii U didn't hit like people thought it was going to hit. And I don't think they ever want to go back to that after experiencing the high of the Switch. And so I see that a future of them being at least more conservative on the hardware end. So we'll see where things go from there. Next up, and we're going to move a little quicker on these next two topics, even though they are pretty big topics unto themselves. Man, what do Western developers need to do to get back on top? Because like right now, you look at EA is probably the best one off right now, but even they had a bad quarter. Dragon Age didn't work out. Apparently, EA Sports Football Club didn't work out, and that's why they lost most of their money. They said, like, they lost a ton of money. I forget what the exact number was. It was like hundreds of millions. And, like, people were like, oh, Dragon Age didn't sell. We told y'all, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, they put most of the fault on that for EA Sports Football Club. That's scary, especially in a world where they're, like, trying to get away from doing licensed games. So it's like, well, what's left? You got Battlefield, but Battlefield, I think, is supposed to come out this year. They're supposed to have a new Battlefield this year, I believe, or early next year. And so, like, but the last Battlefield didn't work, and the one before that didn't work. Battlefield, I think it was Battlefield, what was it, 2041? Is that what it was?
2040.
What was the last Battlefield?
2042, wasn't it?
2042? Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie to you. I don't know.
I think Battlefield.
My last Battlefield 3. That's
Woo!
my last Battlefield.
They had Battlefield 1. That was like the World War I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't really work. It did okay, but it didn't really work. And then Battlefield 2042, and that was like a glitchy pile of, you know what? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, that shit didn't work. So now you're relying on something that is hard to make work. And so, like, what's up?
Which I don't get, because they're not annual releases. They literally take years to come out with Battlefield. They have literally no excuse.
I agree. I agree
with that too.
So, like, they in a bad straits. And then, like, you know, they got Iron Man and Black Panther coming out. But those games are years off. And, like, you know, outside of that, if your sports games aren't working and that shooter don't work and then Apex is falling off, like, all right, okay, well, we'll see. Ubisoft, they damn near about to sell their own company. They haven't had a successful year since, like, 2020. None of their games work. They keep having to cancel shit. Launch games that become laughing stocks like Skull and Bones. Assassin's Creed Shadows, they just keep pushing that back. I don't know if it's because it's bad or if it's because it's like, we think it's good, but is it great? And they keep trying to polish it and hope that it's like a 9. When I'm like, it's going to get the same 82 to 84 that all the good ones get. Like, let it go. Just put that game out. So I mean, that's another one that's in bad shape. They like praying that Shadows is a hit. Warner Brothers, Jason Schreier put out a long report the other day talking about all they studios. It's just a mess of canceled games and reworked projects that were supposed to be live service, and then they had to turn them into real games. And that's all of them. Even Activision had to sell themselves to Xbox. Effectively, every Western AAA dev is struggling right now. It's really just Japanese games, indie games, and AA games. And then, of course, like the usual COD sports games, like, the yearly games is always going to make money. But outside of that, it's like, man, what happened? Like, all y'all struggling. And so I guess I'm like, what do Western devs need to do to get back on top, Will?
Ooh, that's really, I'm being real with you, man. Someone who don't really fuck with too many Western devs in their games, it's hard. But being on the outside looking in, I kind of want to really touch on the EA part because you mentioned them and you mentioned Apex falling off. Because I played that almost like religiously for like a couple years. And recently, like in 2024, I tried to play it one time. I didn't have the urge to play it. I got to the screen where it said press this button to enter, and it's like my spirit said, "Bro, turn it off. You ain't feeling it." I was just like, you know what? Yeah, it was like, give it up, bro. I hit the PlayStation button, hit close app, and deleted the game. I was like, I can't play it. It's not in my heart no more. It's like it was not on me no more because they made so many shit changes and like everything they've done is like bad. But like right now they're trying to bring it back. It feels like, but I'm feeling like it's too late because we've been yelling at them for years. Fix this, fix that, do this, do that. If you do these things, it'll be fine. Quit listening to the motherfuckers that stream and make money for you. Listen to us down here on the floor who really pay for everything and play this game. Listen to us. We're trying to help you get this game straightened out, and they won't do it. So truthfully, I had to say the only thing they can do is literally like somewhat listen to the community, at least in the case of multiplayer games. I'll say that. In the case of multiplayer games, listen to your community a little more closely. Actually do what they ask of you instead of doing what you want to make your money, because that's what screwed Apex here. Because they had the motherfuckers up top, because I'm pretty sure you've seen the stories if you haven't, but a lot of the top players from that game have said, I'll talk to the devs. They want to make the changes, but the suits be saying no because they want the money. They said the suits have said, look, put them skins out, put that collection event out, don't fix the audio, don't change the visual clutter, get me my 100 million by the end of the week because I want these skins sold. That's what they want. Now, I know I'm over exaggerating, so for those of y'all who play Apex like I did, do not get in your feelings in the comments. Please don't. But it's just, that's how I feel. At this point, Western devs just kind of have to listen, look, and learn. That's the most I can say for them, because every other company's game that I played, including indie games and whatnot, they have listened, they've cared, they moved forward, and they've made the right changes. Western companies are hard-headed because they want $1. That's what that is.
You wouldn't exaggerate that much. Apex Legends lost 70% of their Steam base in 2024.
Dang.
Well, shit.
That's a lot of players. And if you lost 70% of your Steam player base, I bet you may not have lost 70% of your console, but you lost something. Yeah. They didn't just it's not just like, oh, the Steam players are special and they just all left, but like the console players stayed. Like, nah, you lost something over there on them consoles too.
No. Exactly.
So
man,
that's wild. Devin, what do you think? What do Western devs need to do to get back on top?
I'm kind of just going to echo Will just a tad bit, what point he made about the people up top. I think there got to be a shift in power and like decision making. I get it. You have investors. You need money to make these games. We just talked about how expensive games can be, but at the same time, I'm an old man at this point when it comes to gaming. I'm an unk in the gaming world, compared to some people. Like,
I mean, he not wrong.
And I'm finna be an old man. Like back in my day, like there was a certain feel of game. Like you knew back in the day, games were fun. Like people knew like a game had to be fun, right? I mean, throughout history, we had like reviewing of games, Game Informer, Game Pro, all these electronic gaming monthly, all these magazines, right? Fun factor was literally a criteria that Game Pro review games off of. It was a fun factor was one of the things they rated. And it's like now it's like the game got to be fun. Like it's like people don't understand, if you make a good product, you make a good game, people more than likely gonna buy it. You don't have to focus on like the extra gimmicks and nickel and diamond people. Again, Mortal Kombat 1 is a great example. Like I said this many times, I don't think that game came out in that way it was, and that was because of Ed. It was because of Warner Brothers. Like, and if we look at Warner Brothers right now, they're like really just like, I don't know what to say about them. Like Multiverses, I never had faith in it. That game never looked intriguing to me. They led with their wallet, which was a problem. Oh, if you see a game, that's another thing they got to stop doing. Western companies like leading with their wallet. They made it an esports before it even came out. You can't do that. You got to let the people play the game and decide if they want to play it, if it's going to have a big enough base. You can't just be like, well, this is an esports game. Y'all going to play it competitively. Now, y'all did that little 100,000 tournament at Evo, and the game is dead now. So you can't start that type of stuff like that. And just trying to make like keep up with these trends and just like, I don't know, EA, Madden is like, it's funny. I always watch Angry Joe. Every year he does Madden. Every year he gets a atrocious score. Every year it's on his top 10 worst games of the year list, and rightfully so. Like if you look at the game, it's so lazily done. The animations are terrible. It's always glitching. It's like there is no way you're telling me this game comes out in this fashion every year. Y'all make it so much money from these games. People cracking packs and cracking card packs, which is stupid to begin with. So you telling me you can't at least give the people a good product? But on the flip side of this, I was talking to Sage about this. It's like, it's one thing to say these people making these games like this and making these decisions, you got to stop buying them. When you have so many drones that buy these games and, hey, man, I'm going to play Madden and I'm going to crack these packs. It's like, well, hey, you still buying it. It's not that great. I know sales-wise, it seemed like, I feel like at one point Football Club was doing well, but I even heard that game was kind of trash. Like, it's kind of buggy. I'm like, bro, like, EA used to be a heralded developer. I watched a video about like the older EA, and man, it's like it just took me back to the flashback to the past. SSX, Tricky, NBA Street, FIFA Street, NFL Street, all these games, and it's like what they are now, like Time Splitters, all these EA properties. It's like it's just kind of sad to see them in the state they're in. And like I said, I used to play Madden, and like Madden hadn't been good to me since PS2, and I'm just being honest. Like Madden hadn't been good since maybe Xbox 360. It's just not a great experience. Ubisoft right now, I don't know. I don't know what to say about them either. They literally had a chance to have a really successful game last year and just literally just dropped it all. Like X-Fine could have been a great game, a great competitor to COD, and it was like, nope. We're not going to make a decent game. We're going to have glitches and mechanical problems, technical problems. So, hey, yeah, we just lost again. And it's on them. They have to realize it's on them. They can't be like, well, the people like, they were saying, oh, well, the game is supposed to do. No. Y'all made a bad game. Stop blaming it on other people. You got to go and do the right things to make a good game.
They should have put that game out earlier, though. That's
also another thing. It kept delaying beta. I was like, when is it going to come out? Y'all took all this extra time for it to come out, and it was still garbage? Okay. Okay.
What's up, Will?
To speak a little bit more on what Devin just said about the sports games, I didn't really care to touch on that because I hadn't played them in over a decade my damn self, truthfully. So I'll say this. The number one thing that EA needs, and on the other side of the coin 2K needs, they need competition. That's what they need. They need to be butting heads with each other. And what that also means is that both of them motherfuckers got to give up them exclusive licenses they got to their respective sports.
They'll never do that.
I know that's the problem. They need to. That's the problem. They won't give it up, but they need to.
100% right on that.
NBA Live need to come back, and then NFL 2K needs to be back. If those two things come back, then we'll have something going here where they have a quality product on both sides of the fence. But that's the problem. It won't happen.
The only way you can get that to happen is by pushing. You'd have to do that from the other end. Like, you'd have to push NBA and the NFL to be like, hey, man, stop with these exclusive licenses, sell that license to some other people. Mm-hmm. And then once you did that, that would force competition, and that would be what you would get from that. Like, that's how you get that. Terrence,
slot machines, man.
What do Western devs have to do? I know you don't play a ton of Western developed games, but what did Western devs need to be doing to get back on top?
There was definitely a time where I did, but I'll say, just to keep mine brief, I think they really just need to get their budgets under control, or maybe just like better expectations. But, it's a two-edged sword, because it's come to a point where the audience also has certain expectations, which is kind of like the big difference between Western devs and Japanese devs is that for a lot of Japanese games, like RGG Studios, we are seeing them like reuse assets, and the fans of those games, they're okay with it as long as the games come out great and they're polished in all other aspects. They don't really care about the fact that assets are being reused. Whereas with Western devs, it feels like every single game has to have new assets. And we know that that kind of stuff, it takes a long time. And
Horizon.
as a result, these budgets are just so out of control that if a game does happen to fail, then that's kind of it, which is really the problem with this generation as a whole, is that you're not allowed to fail anymore. And the thing is, you will fail. Everybody in life is going to fail, like at some point. And because developers, like, think about like previous generations, like how even like your favorite developer at some point, they've had a failure.
Right.
I could think of like
yeah.
just off the top of my head, like Suda 51, you know, you've had Killer 7, you've had trying to think of all the games of Suda 50.
Lollipop Chainsaw.
Lollipop Chainsaw.
Yeah,
There are a bunch of
Lollipop
others. I
Chainsaw.
just can't think of them at the moment. But think about
Shadows of
if
Damn.
one of
Yeah.
there you go, Shadows of Damn. Thank you, Rakeem. But yeah, just think if one of those games had failed and that was the end of that studio. That was the end of Suda 51. He wasn't allowed to make anything else. You wouldn't get any other games, or at least get another shot at him being able to do other games. You wouldn't get anything great. One of the the reason why I'm even talking about this is one of the gaming YouTubers I follow. He talked about how failure is like, it's sad that so many fans now are cheering the failure of developers and like wanting devs to get fired and everything. And it's like, that's getting rid of competition. And imagine if Yoko Taro, like the first Nier, you know, it wasn't like the greatest game ever.
It was
Like
not.
Right,
think
it
about if that game meant that Yoko Taro could never make another game again. You would never get Nier Automata. So, you know, there you go. Like, that's kind of like the thing, is that we need to get back to a point where these budgets can get a little bit under control. Expectations can be managed. That way, there's at least like games that are not like the greatest thing ever can at least exist with the games that are like really great. Hopefully that makes sense. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not cheering on like mediocre games or anything like that, but I think there does need to be some room for like growth and failure and kind of figuring things out. And we're just at a point in the gaming industry where these devs, they aren't allowed to make any mistakes, because a mistake that costs you your studio. And I think that by extension of that, I think Western devs also just need to treat their employees better. I'm not saying that Japanese devs are perfect or Chinese devs are perfect, but we just don't really hear about layoffs in the same way that we do in the West. Now, I know the way they treat layoffs in Japan. Yeah, I know it's much different in Japan, because I know, like, I think how it works is they just slowly stop giving you work and you just kind of force yourself out at some point.
They shame you out of the building for not being useful. So if they see you not doing that, they be like, leave.
Yeah, so I know it's different, and they have layoffs in their own way in a sense, but still, I imagine morale for like Western devs has to be at an all-time low with how much you're hearing about the industry. Like, folks are being laid off. You hear about folks showing up for work and, you know, there's like a sign outside their office saying like, hey, you've been shut down or something like that. It's just a bunch of wild stories that have come out in these past couple of years about how devs are being treated. And a lot of these people, they might just leave the industry. So I think that's another thing too, is just folks have to be treated better. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I don't have like the end all be all answer, but I just think that's part of it, is that, you know, Western devs, they got to get their budgets under control, expectations under control, treat their employees better, and just figure out a way to make it where failure isn't just the end of your studio. I don't know how we do that. I don't know how we get the budgets back down to where they need to be, but push has to come to shove somewhere.
So you covered a lot there, and one of the things you said is that game studios need to be allowed to try again. I know Assassin's Creed, the first Assassin's Creed, wasn't really all of that.
No,
it was just all right.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot about the first.
What's going on, Devin?
I just want to say really quickly, I understand totally, Terrence. You made a great point. about games not having to be just this astronomically well thing. They can be okay games that improve on things. Eternal Strands is a great example of that. I just mentioned, I know Sage has played it. I played it. I wasn't that great on it when I played the demo. The combat's not that great. The combat could use some work. The sound effects for the combat's not poppy enough. But I actually like this game. I actually went back and played more of that demo and actually downloaded on Game Pass. I got like a 76, 75, I believe, score. But I'm actually glad that I went back and played it because it's a perfect example that there is a base there that can be expounded upon that's really solid enough. Like the environmental effects, the physics, there's some really good stuff in that game, just outside of a few things that could be touched up on. But if those people took the time and took that base and were to add on it, they could make something great here. So that's a perfect example of what you were talking about. Like a game didn't have to be, it wasn't necessarily a failure, but it didn't do like superb, but it was still like a decent game. So I just wanted to, that you made me think about that.
I mean, as Terrence was saying that, I thought about part of Jason Schreier's article where he was talking about the failures at Warner Brothers. And one of the things they talked about was, and I'm going to read here directly, but you should go read this. It's on Jason Schreier's Blue Sky account. It's a part of Bloomberg's like paid thing, but if you click his link, you basically just get to read the article for free. You should go check it out. But it talks about how when they put out Gotham Knights, it had mediocre reviews. It's like 70, something like that. I think maybe like a low 70, and it got like okay sales. But there's a part of it where it says, even so, based on the hard-earned lessons from the previous development cycle and equipped with new proven technology, the Montreal studio leaders wanted to make another iteration of Gotham Knights, a 1.5 version that would fix some of the predecessor's flaws. But their bosses nixed the idea, according to people familiar with the plans, and instead assigned the bulk of Montreal's staff to help out with other projects across Warner Brothers. You could have fixed some of that. Yeah. You could have took that same Gotham City, which was a decently designed Gotham City. Like, it was a lot of really good level design in that game. You had the characters worked out. Like, you could have fixed that. You could have added some additional bosses. You could have gotten a better writer in there for like a sequel type game. And you could have come out with a game that's like, okay, well, the first game wasn't really all of that. But this second one kind of fired. It's some heat. And you could have fixed it. But they don't want to fix nothing. They want to move on to the next project. They're too busy trend chasing. It's too busy trying to find out the next lottery ticket, because that's really what all this is. It's just lottery tickets. They looking for, they just scratch off the lottery tickets. Like, oh, am I gonna get the next? Am I gonna get $1 million? No, you had to lay off 30% of your workforce. It didn't work out. Next lottery ticket. Oh, am I gonna get the next $1 billion? It's gonna make all the money? No, you just lost $200 million for no reason. Like, go fix your fucking games. Like, work on some games. Find some shit that you believe in and stick with it. Shit.
No.
And then the other thing Terrence said, God, the other thing Terrence said that I really agree with is he said, hey, man, the worker morale is low as hell and people have to leave. Once again, Jason Schreier pointed that out years ago. He said some of these most experienced devs are just gone. Like, they got tired and this was years ago. He was like, they got tired of dealing with the conditions in gaming, the low pay, the hours you work, and they moved on to they started working on other projects in software and outside of gaming. And so, like, some of your most talented developers, they already walked out the door. And a lot of these games, a lot of the problems you see with these games is because you got a bunch of rookie developers and just a handful of vets. And like, that's not going to get better if you don't like finally fix some of these conditions. So yeah, Terrence is 100% right. Rakeem, what's going on? How do Western devs come to fix this shit?
Yeah. So my idea, and I am very strong on this, is that the problem that they're facing now is a lot of it's due to them eroding trust in the players. The players of the games do not trust them to create the best possible game for them. They believe they are only out to making a profit and exploiting them to make a profit. And you see that, I've seen that with like some of the people I follow, like maybe some YouTubers or streamers, and you'll see people will mention games to them like, hey, there's a new, you're going to play this new Star Wars game by Ubisoft. And it's like, Ubisoft? No. Like, no, I played this game. They've burned me. You can only burn gamers so many times before they're like, I'm fed up with this. And I think our remnant, it's not the whole reason, but one of the reasons this is happening to them now, where these things they're not buying these games in bulk, is because they've been burned. Gamers, just like you have all these costs for your company to develop games, we have costs with buying games. They're expensive to buy. It's a hobby that is becoming increasingly expensive with the aspect of not only the games prices increasing, but DLC, battle passes, deluxe editions, special editions that give you stuff with the games, and then like games not only existing as the game, but like prolonging for years and years and years and years and years. It's an expensive hobby now. And because of that, we have to mind where we put our money. And if you've burned me 2, 3, 4 times, I'm putting my money in people who don't burn me every time. Like when I think about back in the day when I used to play Darksiders. Darksiders was a good game. But even then, I remember it had 3 expansions of DLC, and I liked the game. And I was like, I could get the season pass. I got the season pass, never played the season pass. And that was like back then, I was like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't just buy all these season passes. That was my mind starting to cut costs even back before this bubble kind of popped. So imagine like with a company that you played a game you didn't like, you definitely not buying the expansion or the DLC. Hell, the way these games are going, some of these games ain't never gonna get no expansions because they're failing too much. But yeah, so like the first thing they do is bring back trust in the gamers. You need to make smaller projects that are focused and the games are good. And like you guys said, build off of those. If you keep trying to slam the door on these older projects, and this is something else that I believe as well. Sometimes you've milked this IP for too long. You need to go away from it and try something new. Try some new ideas. And you can return to the IP. And I know it's scary because you've been milking this cow for so long. But once that bubble pops, it pops. That's it. And I'm scared we're nearing that with Assassin's Creed, because if that is the case, Ubisoft is fucked.
I think that's where, and you know what? I think if they had gone away, if they hadn't put out Assassin's Creed Mirage, I think they would be in a better position. But they were so obsessed with trying to get out, like they wanted to satisfy all those people that wanted old school Assassin's Creed back. Well, damn it, if old school Assassin's Creed fans wanted to play them, you wouldn't have had new school Assassin's Creed.
That's
like
true.
new school Assassin's Creed made you all this money, and you trying to go get an audience that wasn't big enough the first time, and you pissed them off the first time. You should have just left it alone. And then like,
you go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I would say that's a symptom of trying to make everybody happy.
Yep.
And sometimes you try to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy. It's kind of hard to appeal to a casual and a hardcore fan base. A casual gamer and a hardcore gamer, they want different things and want to focus on different things. That's something we're seeing in the fighting game industry now, where there's this battle between casual gamers and hardcore gamers. But that's a whole different animal. In the fighting game is more on the Eastern development side than the Western development side for the most part, except for MK, which is going through its own ups and downs now. Outside of sales, it's still sold well. But it's that the name
DLC
value.
didn't.
The DLC didn't. The name value and the post game is where things are getting concerned. But yeah, so they got to get the trust back from the gamers, and that's got to come from like, look, you need to put out some solid quality games that aren't fucking buggy messes in launch. Maybe it's okay to go away from some of your strong IPs and put out some solid ideas for some solid projects, but scale them down. If you're trying a newer IP, don't put it to the same scale as fucking Assassin's Creed. That doesn't make any sense. Scale it down to a point where like you can make a reasonable profit from a reasonable amount of sales.
Thanks.
And then if it is a mega success, then gradually scale it up to meet where the sales have gone to. That makes more sense. Or don't.
Just keep making that. If once you got a decent success, just stick with that, like Yakuza does.
That's true. That's true. I mean, what helped Yakuza was like the Dragon engine just became so it hit the perfect balance of like visually appealing and usability, and had a lot of different functionality. They could just coast off that for 5-6 years.
Yep.
Didn't have to change engines all the time. But yeah, so like you have to get trust back in the gamers. Stop chasing these fucking trends. Man. Ubisoft, I'm looking at you. Y'all tried to do everything. Battle Royale, extraction shooter. Y'all wrote open world into the ground. Everything was open world. Everything. And that
they might should have stuck with that.
It worked for a long time until Star Wars.
I mean, even Star Wars, like part of the reason, like if they hadn't gone away from it and made all them trends, like they ran open world to the ground, but like open world always sold well for them. And then they just decided, oh, you know what? We don't want that no more. We want extraction. That's what's making the money.
Man,
Ain't nobody made money off Extraction except Tarkov and Dark and Darker. But
we don't even talk about it. They canceled a bunch of projects we didn't even know about. So there's a chance we saw like some of the new IPs like Phoenix Rising. That was a new IP that did okay, and they just like, you know what, fuck this sequel, because we can't be satisfied with some of the money. We gotta have all the money, baby. If we ain't got all the money, baby, screw it. We don't care.
Man, Stephanie Sterling said that shit. She was right. Like every time I think about it. She said that shit back in 2011, 2012, and I've been thinking about it for 13 years because every time I look at some dumbass decision the developer make, I'm like, that's because you couldn't just have some of the money. You had to have all of it.
All of the money.
Fucked it up. Now you ain't got none of it.
Yeah, like chasing trends has been a big part of this because everyone, like back in our day when we were like teenagers or like in college, the trend was everybody wanted to be Call of Duty. Because Call of Duty was this mega success. No one had seen nothing like it. It crossed barriers into like casual conversation. And so that's why we had this era of just like low quality or medium quality dirt shooters. I call them the dirt shooter. Everybody's grungy, dirty, brown, green, boots on the ground, muddy. We shooting it all up. And besides Spec Ops The Line, which was actually doing something interesting with that idea, for the most part, it was very mediocre. So like that was even back then, people were failing at chasing that trend, trying to be the new Call of Duty. And to this day, nothing has really outside of Fortnite, but Fortnite is kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
To me,
now
like
now everybody want to be Fortnite.
Everybody want to be Fortnite. Like it's crazy how like we chase these trends, and for the most part, only a few can ride the coattails of the trendsetter. But eventually what happens is the new game comes up that sets a new trend and people follow that. And like, maybe y'all should just try like, hey, maybe we should trying something that our specific studio is really good at. Maybe open world games from Ubisoft, maybe sports games from EA, but doing it in a unique way, trying a twist on it where people are like, okay, we know these guys make decent games in this arena, but they've made the same game for so long, I'm kind of tired of it. Well, this is a different twist on that with a different idea. Like, to me, I remember when Watch Dogs first came out, I saw it, I was like, this looks like GTA, but tech stuff. And now you got, you control things. And, you know, even though the full idea of that was up and down, the idea itself was solid. I think that was a good idea.
They should have never gone away from that.
Yeah.
Like, I understand Watch Dogs Legion didn't work. That's because you ignored all the lessons you learned from Watch Dogs 2 and just did something completely different. What they should have done was just go further into the cyberpunky elements and just like stick with the multi-diverse, multiracial, diverse cast of cool young hackers, and they should have just kept doing that. Watch Dogs 2, like people made fun of it at first, but then it came out and people played it. They was like, no, actually, this game kind of cold.
Yeah,
you should have stuck with that.
Yeah,
and it comes back to what Terrence said. It had one failure and they gave up. Yep. It's like, bro, like the first game sold well. Second game sold not as well, but still sold well, and people fucked with it more. And you could have made more money if you had just stuck with that franchise, but no, you just gave up.
A lot of giving up in the games industry. Yeah, but like, so that's just to keep it short. Just my ideas. Look, you got to get trust back in the gamers. You got to put out multiple solid projects. You got to stop trend chasing and like become the trend yourself by keeping solid to what makes your studio unique. And also adding new development ideas to that. That could be, hey, let's we have an idea of what we want to make. Let's focus on our core group and then maybe get a few people outside of it who specialize in maybe unique combat systems or like more social elements in the game or something like that contend to what the type of game we want to make. And then the last thing is you gotta stop being so freaking greedy, man. Like it feels like being a gamer now is like being a slot machine. Everybody wants to slide the card on you. They pop-ups everywhere for DLC, pop-ups everywhere. Like at a certain point, we need to like curtail some of this stuff back. Because if the gamers think you only want their money from them, the facade of gaming is that the experience is just for me to enjoy it and not to make money. That's when you're playing it. But you pull back the facade when you put the slot machine in front of me and tell me to spend my money while I'm playing the game. Imagine playing God of War in the middle of fighting a boss. You're like, hey, man, if you really want to beat this boss, go ahead and spend $5.99 for our special DLC X, man, for Kratos. And you really tear his ass up, man. That's what it feels like. And that's not one-to-one, but that's what it feels like when you're playing games now.
I'll tell you what. Go ahead. Sorry.
you've reminded me of a very old anecdote from an EGM where somebody tried to hype that up as like the future, and that would be like a really cool idea.
No.
Imagine you was struggling with a boss, and you could just pay $2 for X and just whoop the boss's ass with the weapon.
No.
It's like, nigga, why the fuck would I want that?
No. So that's the problem. You think like your mindset is already on profit and not on like what would be cool for gamers to experience. At some point, you got to put the idea of what would be a cool thing for gamers to experience that either they have experienced but not in a certain way, or a completely different experience they haven't experienced before. And what does that look like in our games? That idea has to be at the forefront of what you wanted to create. And that's basically what I think.
And honestly, if you want to like get money out of your gamers that way, just make it a free to play gacha. That exists. Just go that route.
So here's the thing, because I mean, like, free to play doesn't always solve all your problems.
No, it doesn't.
Not saying that you were saying that, but just like the gacha thing, man, they got Japanese people so good with gacha. They got into it so well, and because they have gacha machines, so that's kind of that's where the mechanic came from. They got them so good that there are paid games with no deal, with no like, there's no money that you put into it, but there are gacha mechanics in the game anyway. It's like, oh yeah, you know, you slot machine, do this, and like Xenoblade 2 had the blades where you could like you got your little ticket, and then you could just crack open and see what kind of blades you got.
Infinite Wealth.
What does Infinite Wealth have a gacha mechanic?
And with Sujimon, there's a certain part where you can just get Sujimon from like a gacha. It's like opening a prison cell.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a gacha mechanic. You don't put any real money into it, but it does have a gacha mechanic. Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, like that's when you got people really bought into the gacha. When you could just throw that shit in a game, you're not paying no money. It's just like, hey, there it is. I'm gonna cut the last question, and we may turn that into a podcast at some other time because it is a question a good question unto itself. But I agree with basically everything Keem said. These Western devs, at some point, they're going to have to suck it up, and because like here's the thing, trend chasing worked for every dev for a long time, but here's the problem with trend chasing now. It takes too damn long to make a video game.
Yep.
And by the time you've made that game, the trend is fucking over. It's done.
Get you Concord.
It's like, and not just Concord, like all them fucking all them battle royales and all that other shit. Like you chasing the trend the day before. That's another one. By the time you done like putting the game out, it's like, oh, I mean, yeah, we was doing that in 2018, but it's 2025 now. Like I don't do that anymore. I've moved on. And so I think I agree with Akeem very strongly in that, like, you need to figure out what you do and then just like stick to that. And maybe you can incorporate an idea or two that's clever, or maybe like you can look around at what other games are doing so that you're not behind from like what's the word? Like the quality of life ideas. Like there's certain things like fast travel between different areas, like in RPGs, like you can't put out, I don't know what the fuck the Dragon's Dogma developer was thinking. He was like, oh, your world's not interesting enough. That's a damn lie. Like, I don't care how interesting your world is. Sometimes I just need to turn the quest in. Sometimes that's all I want to do. And so like the idea that I have to, very slowly walk or ride a horse and you don't know what might happen. Like, no, I want to cut the game off. I got work in the morning. I don't want to have to make the 30-minute trek back to the city and shit. So like you should look around to make sure you got the quality of life features that every gamer wants for that genre. But like, don't be like, oh man, we've got to make our own battle royale. Battle Royale's making all the money. We've got to make our own Destiny likes to making all the money. Like, nah, because like by the time you put it out, it's not making no money no more. And now you put it out and you've cost people their jobs because you were trying to make all the fucking money. And then the other thing that I also agree with what Rakeem said, set a budget and be like, all right, look, what does it take for us to not go over this budget? Like what kind of team will we have to have? What's the year? Let's focus on like we not gonna have hella feature creep. We just gonna stick to the game that we gonna make, and that's it. And like there's an indie developer, Xavier Nelson. He talks about this a lot, where he was like, when you're an indie developer, you don't get to just keep doing scope creep and keep adding things. Not if you want to put a game out on time. Like you have to know exactly what you're getting into and basically focus on it the way that you would a business and the way that you like, because that's what movies have done. Movies have gotten it down to a science, and people are like, oh, well, gaming's not a science. Like, science. You can put some of that down to a science where you just stop adding shit that don't need to be there and stop trying to put every feature into your game. Like you can put some stuff, but you can't put everything. And so like you do that, and then you focus on the soul of your game. Like I don't know, like Knockout City. I don't know, like that game eventually had a low player count, but like if you had just put that game out as like a $30 game or a $20 game, and it's like, okay, it's out, we not adding no more content to it. Like this it. And so if you want to play it, you can play it. And it sells, if you had the budget right, and it sold like maybe 2 million, 3 million copies. Well, 3 million is too high. 1 million, 2 million copies. And it's like, all right, well, that's it. And if you want to go buy it, you can still go buy it. If you want to play it, you can play it. But like we're not adding to this game. It's not meant to be a live service game. And like if you do more of those and stop trying to think you can get $70 out of everybody, and stop trying to think you can get, because I mean, like I talked about this with Devin the other day. Like Batman pissed me off a long time ago. Like that's when I knew I'd hit my limit on what I was willing to tolerate from a Western developer when they charged me $60 for the game, and in the battle pass or the season pass or whatever it was $50. I'm like, I just gave you 60 and you want another 50? Yeah, you know, to get all the skins and to get these extra villains and to get the, like, bro, like if you had said 30, I might have been like, okay, maybe. But 50, like that's the game again. Like you selling me another game. Am I going to get another game's worth of content out of this? No, of course not.
Unless you Elden Ring.
What I'm going to do is wait for the Game of the Year edition.
That's what I'm going to do. And you train
For
people.
real.
And Ubisoft low-key kind of train people with this too. They put their games on sale a little too quickly. And so now everybody's like, well, all I got to do is wait like 3 months and then the game's going to be half off, which their sales aren't that good, but they do tend to be like, all right, you know, this $60 game, now you get it for $40. It's like, oh, well, why did I buy it, you know, when it came out, when I could have just waited 3 months? I could have waited till Black Friday.
Metaphor. Anyway.
Hey man,
Bought it for full price, the next day, hey, it's like $48.
Yep.
I bought the collector's edition.
Feels
so I can't
fantastic.
speak. I bought the collector's edition. I can't speak. So
Yeah, that's a different thing. But like
Yeah.
if at some point you got to stick to what you're good at and just like iterate on what you're good at, because I think Terrence had a great idea too. Like it's okay to iterate a little bit, and then if you need to, if you feel the franchise fatigue, you can go away. Not too long though, because like Dragon Age
Not
Inquisition,
10 years.
not 10 years. You know, like you
you
go away 5 years.
Now,
and
what
then
I'm
come
talking
back.
about essentially is what Prince of Persia did. Like they went away from IP, but they had a new IP replace it for a while. And then once the IP was kind of missed, then they started bringing it back to varying success, obviously. But at least they tried. You know what I'm saying?
They
Like
did
at least
try.
they had something in the middle that was new, because Assassin's Creed was just new. Like it was a new IP, a new idea. We had never really seen anything like it before. That's more so what I want to see. You need to start. You've had these IPs like 10, 15 years. It start to like, hey, it's time to go move from John Cena to Roman Reigns. You know, it's time to move, you know, it's time to get the new top dog. Like it's time to pass the baton. It's okay. It's okay.
Well, one sign, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say before we close the show. One sign is when the fans start begging you for it to come back. That's when you need to bring it back.
That's when
Splinter Cell. People been begging for that to come back. Mega Man. People been begging for Mega Man to come back. When they start begging you, like, bro, please make a new this, or they like, man, see, this is the problem. Y'all won't make another this. Like, that's when you figure out, like, okay,
Capcom figured that out.
Capcom has figured it out.
They're bringing it back out like right on
And-
time. Like it's been missed long enough.
We probably not too far off from a new Mega Man game, which is a cool idea.
Man,
Let's
with
see
a
what
big
that looks like.
budget, man.
With a decent sized budget, and maybe like get us
the
a
RE engine. Let's
RE
go.
engine.
Woo! I hope so.
Mr. Bomber,
Man,
come back,
that'd be
baby.
If I got what I
Man,
wanted, it'd
that'd
be
be
a Mega
crazy.
Man Legends or like a Mega Man RPG.
Hell yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, there we go. But that's gonna wrap up this week's episode. If you liked it, you know what the deal is. I want you to hit that like button. If you haven't, hit the subscribe button and do me a personal favor. Have an excellent week. Peace.